We're going to talk more about Dwayne Haskins, Steelers quarterback who tragically passed away this weekend in an auto accident, and how his passing and how people react to it should teach us more about how we should aspire to cover and talk about athletes in sports more like human beings. We'll talk about that as well as how positions could play out in the 19 picks in front of the Steelers' 20th overall pick in the first round of the NFL draft, as well as announce our new Mock Draft Monday winner. I'm Chris Carter, Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on the video if you're enjoying it. Hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our breaking news updates. If you want to support the show even further, go on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review with a positive comment. Do both at the same time. You get a special shout out at the end of the show. Thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. And today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is, of course, the place that's going to have you covered all season long on all sports all year long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Be sure to visit BetOnline where the game starts. Now, for our audio listeners who purely listen to Spotify, Apple, etc., you didn't get our bonus episode of the weekend, which was just me giving my initial thoughts on the tragic death of Dwayne Haskins over the weekend. That's on YouTube. If you missed that, go get my comments there. I'm not going to rehash over everything I said in that because my whole point was to cover it in a serious manner, more than just he was the Steelers' third-string quarterback last year, but more of who he was as I understood from talking to him and talking to the players who knew him on the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I truly think that's how we need to be approaching these athletes, more about getting to know who they are and talking about them as human beings. Because oftentimes I feel, and I've always felt like this when I'm covering sports, I'll make note of when a player makes some mistakes. I'll make note of when, a player's not playing well. Heck, I've been on the show long enough. You heard me talk about when players don't play well and how, it may be their time. But when I do so, I try to do so with them always with the respect of them as a human being, always respect of like, what, that person's got a family, that person has feelings themselves. And there's people that care about that person. And I've never liked the idea of like berating an athlete or demeaning an athlete the way that people they did when Dwayne Haskins passed away. Adam Schefter's tweet, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can just do a quick search on Twitter. You can find out what he tweeted and had to delete before, when he tweeted out that he was the first person to officially report Dwayne Haskins passing. But before he even said that Dwayne Haskins died, he tweeted out that he was a struggling quarterback, or a quarterback who was struggling with the Pittsburgh Steelers after struggling with Washington, and it just was not a proper way to address that story. You could also see Gil Brandt, former NFL exec for the Cowboys, who was on radio talking about Dwayne Haskins and making it seem as if Dwayne Haskins, this was coming for Dwayne Haskins, or that something bad was always going to happen to him because of past mistakes or anything like that. Those ways that we do these things make us forget that players are people, and not just people. They're people that live and breathe, that feel, that think just like you and I. Now, these are people that are in way different lifestyles because they've reached the pinnacle of athletic opportunity in their sport. They're getting paid millions of dollars. They've made millions of decisions that have got them to be prepared to this point to be able to be in the sport that they play and on the teams that they play for. So they surely did live different lives, but I think it's unhealthy when people disconnect the player or the person from the player, and that's what I saw with a lot of comments about the situation. When talking about, when talking about Dwayne Haskins, or talking about how players were reacting to Dwayne Haskins. Chase Claypool you could feel his raw emotion. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to his Twitter account. He posted a video of you just hear him calling Dwayne Haskins his brother, and they were just working out together. They were just training together. They spent a whole season together. And this is what I was telling you in the bonus episode that we released this weekend. That was, the breaking news update on the situation when Dwayne Haskins' death was first reported. And I was telling you, this wasn't just a guy that was just around the locker room. He was loved. He was appreciated. He touched other people. And I think that when we cover sports, we have a responsibility to remember that as we're talking about these guys. Because I think that a lot of times we talk about it, and everyone knows Dwayne Haskins, sure, did not have an illustrious NFL career. But what does that matter when we're talking about a man's life? What does it matter when he's no longer here and he's 24 years old? And we're sitting here talking. We hear people talking about, well, he was a third string quarterback, he was a first round draft pick, and blah blah blah. Who cares? And I think that there's times, and me on the Locked On Steelers podcast, if you've been watching this show, if you've been listening to this show, I'm a person who I'm all about the X's and O's. I break things down all the time. I'm talking about draft stock. I'm talking about this, that, measuring metrics and all of that, because that's part of the game. And that I try to make this a place where people could come during their workday, during their commute, during anything, to try to escape from whatever you're doing and listen to talk about your favorite football team. That's what I try to make this. But there's times when you got to be serious. And there's times when you have to approach this and remind everyone, hey, we all know this is a game at the end of the day. But these are people that are really impacted by these things. So when next time you're talking about a player, next time you're thinking about, oh, this guy's this guy's that, and I think you might think that, oh, maybe you're going too far. And it's part of being a fan. It's just naturally how people do it. It's fans can be over the top. It's part of, what fans do. But I think as a whole, whether it comes from journalists, podcasters, broadcasters, fans, anybody thinking or talking about the game, we should be open to the idea to think that the next time we think about berating a player, or we think about going further than just saying, well, he messed that one up on when someone makes a mistake on the field, that we should think of these people as people. Because I think the next time that someone passes away that you think of as an athlete, there's a lot of people that talked bad about Dwayne Haskins, and it's okay to say, when he wasn't playing well. I'm not saying that's not what you can't do, but there were a lot of really negative things that were said. And, even the comment sections, I tried to delete them in my own video that I initially did about Dwayne Haskins. And there were so many. I was like, man, that's a lot. I just think that one thing we can do to make conversations about sports, about the NFL, about, the Pittsburgh Steelers healthier, is that we can remember that when we're talking about athletes that are performing in front of us. They're not just performing. They're not just people putting on a show for you. They're human beings that go home, see their families, live and breathe, have hopes, have dreams, and can sadly also die. And those lives can impact a lot of people, just like people that you love when they pass away. So I wanted to say that, lead the show with that, because I felt like that was an important message, or important thing I wanted to get off my chest about Dwayne Haskins passing. But we'll get into some football talk, NFL draft talk in just a second here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Like I said, knew it would be heavy to start, but it was a heavy situation, so we addressed that. But first, before we move forward, we got to talk about our sponsors at betonline.net. Betonline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting, stats, and information. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NBA playoffs, which start up very soon, as well as NHL playoffs and MLB, with Major League Baseball finally back and underway. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting, playoffs to the playoffs, esports, and more. Head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the trends in the action, in all the playoff action, Major League Baseball being back at BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We are going to switch to some NFL draft talk after talking about the Dwayne Haskins situation. But I wanted to go over, and I've talked about this before, with how positions could play out in this NFL draft for the top 19 picks of the Pittsburgh Steelers, before the Pittsburgh Steelers. Because the Steelers, of course, sitting at 20. As I've said for months now, as soon as we knew that draft spot, that's a really good spot to be in and still get a good shot at a player that's going to be very important for your franchise. Has the potential to be very important for your franchise. Because when you're in that 20 range, when there's only 19 guys ahead of you and there's as much talent as there is in this draft, there's going to be a position that falls to you that is either barely touched or is untouched. And that's when you get the chance to be the first team to pick a position in a draft, to have your pick, and it's a position of need or a position that you can be a pillar of what you're building moving forward. That's an opportunity to put a serious player in the mix of what you're trying to build to become a strong team again. And that's what the Steelers are trying to do. They made the playoffs last year barely. It was great effort. It was a great fight. Everyone was happy about that, but you wanted to see more. Everyone knows their rushing defense wasn't there. The passing offense wasn't there. The offensive line wasn't run blocking enough. You want to see more. So they're building pieces for that. So in this draft class, we did, and I'm not going to give away the full results, but we did a mock draft amongst all the Locked On hosts. And it's going to come out in full very soon before the NFL draft. We have a whole show that we're putting together for y'all. It's going to break down every single pick. I'm going to reveal my pick on this show. But I'm also going to talk about the positions that went in front of when I picked for the Pittsburgh Steelers at 20. I thought about trading up. I talked to a couple people. It didn't work out. Thought about trading back. Yeah, didn't work out. But ultimately, I was happy with where I picked at 20th overall. Now, again, I'm not going to spoil the eventual show by going over by trying to go over all the players that were picked. I do want to save that suspense, but I do want to go over the positions that were picked and how many of each position were picked. So with 19 picks in front of the Pittsburgh Steelers, like I said, if they have a shot at one of the top 3 cornerbacks, the top defensive tackle, one of those top 5 wide receivers, I think all of those are things that should be in play. If Kyle Hamilton falls far enough, maybe you trade up for him. That would be something to look at there. But when I'm looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers and the things this year, this was how I saw things playing out. Just ranking how the big boards and how everyone's looking at players this year. You have edge rushers that are plenty in this draft, and there's going to be plenty to go in the mock draft that we did. 4 edge rushers went before the Pittsburgh Steelers picked 4. And the Steelers don't need an edge rusher this year. Now, if somehow Travon Walker falls 20, if it falls down to 20, hallelujah, pick him, and you got the greatest pass rush of all time, maybe setting up with him and T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith. But that ain't gonna happen. But you don't need it to happen. You're good. You got T.J., you got Alex Highsmith. Jernard Avery's going to be helping there, and you might be able to get a guy in the back end this year who can help with that as well. But 4 offensive tackles went off the board: Evan Neal, Charles Cross, Ikem Ekwonu, and Trevor Penning. So right there, that's 8 players off the board immediately at 2 positions. You're kind of like, yeah. I mean, offensive tackle, the Steelers could use a player there, but those ain't going to fall. But the fact that 4 of each went before, you're almost halfway home as far as getting to a player that you want. 3 cornerbacks went off the board. Now, that's part of the formula that I'm a little shaky on, because I think that one of those cornerbacks could fall to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But those 3 cornerbacks going off the board, that brings you to 11 position players that have been taken. Now, 1 safety was taken. You could probably guess who that was. 1 linebacker was taken. I thought that was a surprise because I didn't think linebackers would go too high in this draft. But still, you've got now, 13 players off the board. You got 6 more players to go. Now, here was the kicker. There were 5 wide receivers picked before the Steelers picked. And in fact, again, I won't reveal all the players' names, but in how this worked out. And again, all these are represented by other Locked On hosts, people that do their shows about their teams every day, just like I do, breaking things down, looking at team needs, keeping their ear to the ground, learning what they do. So this is them picking as if they were the GM of their team. And before the Steelers picked at 20, 3 receivers went off the board in order. And then that's what got them to 5. And 1 quarterback went off the board. You could probably guess who that was. So then I was sitting there. I could have my pick at the 2nd quarterback, a 4th cornerback, but I went with a guy that I said I'm not sure if he'll fall to the Steelers, because he fell to the Steelers in this one of those sprints to podium moments, and that's Jordan Davis, defensive tackle out of Georgia. I'm sorry, I know that they have Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt, but those guys are up there. And Jordan Davis could be the next torchbearer of great defensive linemen for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's an athletic freak, something we've never seen in the NFL. And he's 21 years old. Devontae Wyatt's 24. Jordan Davis represents the guy that could be the big piece that makes the Steelers the best defensive front in football. They already kind of were if Stephon Tuitt's able to get back and be healthy. But if Jordan Davis comes and he's a wrecker, the way we expect him to wreck, my goodness. What could be the Pittsburgh Steelers defense if they have that dominant of a front? And again, having a rotation of players, because still Tyson Alualu is in the mix. And remember, the Steelers are using a lot more 4-man fronts where it's 2 edges and TJ and Alex on the outside, and Stephon Tuitt and Cam Hayward on the inside, that allows them to get an extra DB on the field. But imagine your rotation is Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, Jordan Davis, and Tyson Alualu. My goodness. What could be if that's the case? But again, this is what I'm talking about. If Jordan Davis was taken earlier, that 5th receiver that was taken could drop to the Steelers. That 3rd cornerback could have dropped to the Steelers. There's a lot of opportunities here that I think the Steelers are really going to get. So when people talk about, oh, this player is going to be there, that player is going to be there, I say that sometimes because I think that I have my eyes on certain players that I do think will be gone. But you never know how NFL front officers are thinking. Every year, there's always surprise picks of guys that we thought would go way lower than they were, and they went up really high, or guys that we thought really high that went a lot lower. So I say all that to say, with Jordan Davis being available in our mock draft, that's who I took for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Locked On draft. If the Steelers end up with that, they're going to be feeling pretty good about themselves. And again, I think that he can be a pillar piece to building the next great Steelers defense. Again, not good, but elite. Truly elite. So we'll keep an eye on how things build in the draft. We'll keep an eye on how teams continue to talk and any other trades moving forward. Because like I said, with the Eagles and Saints trade last week, there's a lot more to talk about how that put a different structure on how the picks might flow. And in fact, some of the teams in that trade reached out to me in this mock draft to see if I wanted to trade, and I turned them down because I thought that the player that I was looking at, Jordan Davis, would be right there. And I imagine if he's there for the Steelers, they won't think twice. Even if Kenny Pickett's on the board, they're going and getting themselves a Jordan Davis. But we're going to talk about your mock drafts because we do have a new mock draft Monday winner to announce. And I'm going to break down the picks because the person who did this I thought was pretty clever with how they addressed several Steelers needs and put things together on, that allowed them to seal weaknesses and even talk about how the Steelers are handling free agency right now. We'll do that in just a minute. But first, I got to talk to you guys about Built Bar, that time of the year where everyone is giving up on their New Year's resolutions, but not you. You're not going to do it. Why? You got Built Bar on your side. They're the tasty protein bars that taste like candy bars, but they're so much healthier for you. And if you haven't tried the new Puffs flavors, you're missing out because they're some of the best tasting Built Bars around. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallows. They're fluffy, marshmallowy, and they're not just protein bars. They're a tasty treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate, just like all Built Bars are. Now, the Puffs flavors come in flavors like cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, and banana cream pie. But all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in so many more flavors. But all Built Bars are on the average of 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. You compare that to the average candy bar that has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. That's a much healthier treat for you, and it tastes so good while also helping you stay on plan for your diet so that you're not you're not cheating on yourself there. And there's so many flavors of Built Bars to choose from, whether it's coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, double chocolate, raspberry cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie. There's all those flavors available when you go to Built.com. So go to Built.com and get yourself some Built Bars delivered right to your door. And when you do so, be sure to use the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED 15, LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your next order of Built Bars when you visit Built.com. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. It's time for Mock Draft Monday, which means we're going to be talking about who won. And I think I want to commend this person because this person definitely listens to the show. This person definitely studies their bit and trying to see who the Steelers might be looking at. And also, I think it was a bit timely with one of our experts on the Locked On Podcast Network on the NFL draft and how they broke something down this weekend. Now, without further ado, we congratulate the winner. Garrett Franklin, thank you for your contribution this week as far as the Mock Draft Monday. We thank to everyone who participated and gave me their picks. There were actually like 3 or 4. It's funny when I see a really good draft and I'm like, ooh, that's going to fit right in well with the segments that I want to do on Monday. I save them to my phone. I got to tell you, they're like 5, 6, 7, 8. Like there were like a whole bunch that I saved to my phone. Like, ooh, that one's good. That was good. That one's good. That was good. Normally there's like 2 or 3 that I'm like, okay, this one's perfect for what we're doing today. But y'all made it hard. But Garrett Franklin, you did a great job. And you've had some interesting picks here. Now, Garrett stayed home, didn't trade, and took Lewis Cine, safety out of Georgia, with the 20th overall pick. Now, some people might think, man, safety, come on. They're probably going to sign Honey Badger. They're probably going to sign Terrell Edmonds. Why would you take a safety? Well, Lewis Cine is still another piece that you can add on the field and have that 3 safety look that I've been talking about for so long. And I listened to an interesting bit from Eric Crocker, former NFL player and current co-host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast and the Locked On 49ers podcast. And Crocker made an interesting assertion. He said that Lewis Cine is his number 1 safety in this NFL draft class, which is very interesting to me because everyone's just saying Kyle Hamilton. And listen, Kyle Hamilton's a bad man. I'm not saying he's not. But I've liked Lewis Cine from his tape for quite some time. I know there's people that really love Jaquan Brister, Destin Hall, whatever, all those things. Lewis Cine, to me, his sub 4.4 40 time, his ability to hit, his ball skills, his instincts, his aggressiveness, his size, all of that plays into the type of safety who I think can be a major player next to Minkah Fitzpatrick for years to come. Because remember, Minkah Fitzpatrick's only 25 years old. If the Steelers lock him up, which I think they will, again, we talked about that last week, I think that they're going to talk to him once the draft process is over and they get the whole GM thing done. They want that process to be done with. But yeah, I could see Minkah Fitzpatrick being with the Steelers for another 6, 7, 8 years. And if you have an NFL draft player that's pairing with him in the safety like Lewis Cine, that could be a dangerous athletic duo in a time where you have a really athletic defensive front. And if you got roaming safeties and a dangerous defensive front, it could be the best counter to how all these quarterbacks that are rising up in the AFC, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Derek Carr, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert. I almost called him Justin Tucker. I'm like, no, that's the Ravens guy. But point being, there's a lot of AFC quarterbacks, a lot of talent. And by the way, Russell Wilson's here. But point being, the Steelers need to get a defense that's going to be able to handle those guys. And I think Lewis Cine will be a piece of that. Now, here's the other thing. Garrett double dipped with Georgia here and going right back in the second round and getting George Pickens, a guy who actually, I will reveal one name of our Locked On NFL draft, went in the first round after I picked. And I'm not so sure George will fall that far, but if he does, like it did for Garrett here, I think the Steelers would be good to get him. Mike Tomlin was seen watching him very closely. I think Pickens is the good combination of good speed, good size, good hands, and good route running, and blocks. Likes to be physical. He's the kind of guy that Mike Tomlin would love to add to this roster. And then shortly after that, going in and getting a boost on the offensive line, Nicholas Petit-Frere. Now, now he's, of course, offensive tackle at Ohio State. I've talked about him on the show before. I think he'd be a good physical addition to that group and be a guy that can challenge in the depth because they do need pieces on the offensive tackle rotation. I do think there needs to be help there. But third, in the first round, you're not going to get one of those top 3 dudes. And I'm not a Trevor Penning guy either. I think he has a lot of things to clean up. If Trevor Penning was magically around in the second round, great. Yay, take him. But he's not going to be. And the top 3 guys that I would take at 20, they're not going to be there either. So don't worry about it. And the second round, I think there's a lot of different things the Steelers could do that wouldn't be the offensive tackle position. But again, Nicholas Frere in the third round, not a bad pick. Now, moving on, this pick was big for me. Getting Damari Mathis in the 4th round. That's a sign that these draft machines are starting to see Damari Mathis is going to be a problem. And I really think Damari Mathis, the Steelers could use a cornerback to add to their ranks this year. Justin Lane hasn't worked out. James Pierre, still a special teamer guy. They need a young guy who's athletic. And Damari Mathis has the best athletic profile, in my opinion, of this draft class. Sub 40-yard dash, sub 4.4 on the 40-yard dash, best vertical, best broad jump. Dude is lighting it. I watched him at Pitt. He's aggressive. He has swagger. He has all those things you want. And if he's in the 4th round, you go and get that guy. And if he doesn't work out, oh well, you missed with a 4th round pick on the cornerback. The Steelers do that every year. But he's an athletic talent that I think it's a lot harder to mess up with when they are that athletic. And by all accounts, got a good head on his shoulders too, at least from when I've talked to him. Finishing out the draft, interesting picks here from Garrett. It's a solid way to finish out. Josh Paschal, edge rusher from Kentucky, adds depth there, helps in the rotation. It'll be challenger for Derek Tuska and anyone else there. And the Steelers could use always depth on the edge rushers, so good picks there. And then final 2 picks in the 7th round, Bo Melton. I've talked about him a lot in this show. I think he'd be a perfect 7th round pick at wide receiver for the Steelers. Return man that can help at that position there. Also can be a 4th, 5th option in the wide receiver room. Tough, gritty, good route runner, good guy that can help in the slot, smaller guy. I like that pick there. And of course, rounding out with Connor Hayward, the younger brother of Cam Hayward. I think that's just a really solid pick to wind up this draft. Can be a fullback, can be a 3rd tight end, can be a utility back who's big, physical, athletic. I've seen him make some ridiculous catches. I've seen him run over people. I've seen him make ridiculous blocks. All those different things are reasons why I think he's a great 7th round pick for the Steelers if he's sitting there. And everything that I've seen looks like he's going to be sitting there. And, Steelers like getting their brothers on the same team. Edmonds and Watts can attest. But congratulations again to Garrett Franklin here for Mock Draft Monday. We hope that you guys play next week. We're running out of weeks to do it, by the way. So keep playing, keep giving me submissions in the Locked On Steelers Facebook group or on my Twitter account at Carter Critiques. Thanks again for listening to the show or watching the show here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Again, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you watch this video on YouTube, like it, hit the like button on the video, hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily updates and our breaking news updates as well. If you want to help us out, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts with a positive comment about the show. Do both at the same time, and you get a shout out at the end of the show. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back tomorrow with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.